Useless trash. Look what you've done to my $15,000 shoe. Matisse Ferrari's voice sliced through the stillness of the Anderson mansion's immaculate garden like a blade. The target of his fury was Santiago Nikolic, the old gardener, who trembled as he tried to wipe a tiny splatter of mud from the Italian leather with a cloth. Santiago, at 70, his hands gnarled with arthritis, had stumbled for a mere instant, enough for the hose to slip from his grasp. An accident, a minuscule error in the grand scheme of the universe, but to Matisse, heir to Anders Anderson's empire, it was a personal offense, a capital crime. You're not even fit to hold a damn hose? Maybe it's time we put useless old men like you out to pasture. Maya Ortega Liam was only 28 years old, and had never imagined the job she took to be close to her father would end in that confrontation. She watched the scene unfold from the glass kitchen door, her heart pounding in a frantic, painful rhythm. Maya was autistic. For her, the world was a cacophony of overwhelming stimuli that she organized through rigid routines, patterns, and an inner quietude few understood. Her job as a maid in the mansion was her sanctuary of order. Every cleaning product on her cart was aligned by color and function. Every movement was calculated for maximum efficiency and minimal social contact. But the most important order in her universe was her father. Santiago was her anchor, her calm in the world's sensory storm. Seeing Matisse with his arrogant posture and thinly veiled disdain looming over her frail father shattered all her self-protective barriers. Matisse raised his hand, not to strike, but with that universally humiliating gesture of dismissal, a wave of contempt. Pack your things. You're out. Now. Santiago's face paled. That job was all he had. The only way he could feel useful. The only way to be near his daughter. Humiliation and fear were etched in his watery eyes. It was in that instant that Maya moved. She didn't run. She didn't shout. Her steps were deliberate, silent as she crossed the lawn. She positioned herself directly between Matisse and her father, a small yet unshakable human shield. Her expression was neutral, almost blank to a casual observer, but her eyes fixed on Matisse with an intensity that made him instinctively step back. "Mr. Ferrari," she said, her voice a calm monotone, devoid of emotion, which made it even more disconcerting. "My father's employment contract, Section 4, Paragraph B, stipulates that any dismissal for just cause requires a written warning and a 48-hour evaluation period. An accident with a hose does not qualify as just cause under the defined terms." Matisse blinked, caught off guard by the robotic, legalistic response. He had expected tears, pleas, not a citation from an HR manual. "What are you talking about, you weirdo? I'm the owner's son. I decide what's just cause." Maya didn't flinch. According to Anderson Global Company protocols, even in private residences, labor laws and internal agreements must be respected. Non-compliance can result in legal proceedings. Mr. Anders Anderson made sure to include that clause to avoid unnecessary liabilities. The mention of his father's name made a vein pulse on Matisse's forehead. He hated it when employees used his father against him. "Are you threatening me?" he hissed, leaning forward, invading her personal space. The scent of his expensive cologne was cloying, an assault on Maya's senses. She didn't retreat. Her eyes didn't waver. "I am stating a fact. Information." What neither Maya, nor Matisse, nor poor Santiago knew was that they weren't the only ones witnessing the scene. On the second floor, behind the tinted glass of his office, Anders Anderson watched it all. He had approached the window, drawn by his son's shouting, and was now frozen, watching that extraordinary interaction. He saw his son's lazy cruelty, a trait that disgusted him deeply, but which he never knew how to correct. And he saw the girl, the quiet maid, whom he barely noticed in the hallways. The way she stepped in, her preternatural calm, her quiet courage. It was mesmerizing. He watched her protect her father not with hysterics, but with logic and facts. A strength that Matisse, with all his power and privilege, didn't know how to combat. Anders didn't move. He didn't intervene. Part of him wanted to go down and put Matisse in his place, but another part, a more calculating and curious part, wanted to see how it would end. He saw something in Maya that intrigued him profoundly. She wasn't just reacting. It felt as if she had been waiting for this, as if she knew this day would come. And indeed she did. Maya had noticed the subtle signs for weeks. Mathis accidentally knocking over her cleaning cart, scattering her meticulously organized products, sarcastic comments about her need for noise-canceling headphones while vacuuming, the way he looked at her father, as if the old man were a worn-out piece of furniture. Quick flashbacks flooded her mind. Mathis last week telling a guest, Mr. Tariq Garcia Fr., "Don't worry about the old man, he's practically deaf and dumb." Another moment, 2 weeks ago, when he deliberately left a glass on the edge of a table knowing she'd have to pass by, just to watch her struggle not to disturb its precarious balance. They were tests, little demonstrations of power. She had cataloged each one in her mind, with date, time, and context. And now, the escalation had reached its peak. "Get out of my way," Mathis growled at Maya. "Before I fire you too." Maya remained motionless. That would also be a contractual violation. Retaliation against an employee defending another's rights. The precision of her words was like ice. Mathis let out an incredulous, cruel laugh. "You really think my father will care about rules because of some weird cleaner and a senile gardener? You're both disposable." He turned, kicking an earthenware pot in anger, which shattered on the stone patio. "Consider that your written warning. Clean this mess up. You have 24 hours to be off my property." He strode away, confident he had won, leaving Maya and her father amidst the shards. Santiago began to cry silently. "My daughter, what have you done? He'll destroy us." Maya placed a firm hand on his shoulder. Her eyes, however, were not on her father. They were fixed on the second-floor window, where she knew the office of the true power in the house resided. She didn't know if he was there, but she acted as if he were. And while everyone in the mansion, from the cooks to the security guards who heard the commotion, saw only a helpless maid who had sealed her fate, her eyes revealed a serenity that only exists in those who have faced much worse storms and survived to tell the tale. There, before all the pitying and contemptuous gazes, she stood as firm as someone guarding a secret too powerful to reveal before the right time. If this story of prejudice and resilience touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to find out how a simple moment of humiliation would become the catalyst for a revolution no one in that mansion would ever forget. The next 24 hours were an exercise in psychological warfare. Mathis, in his youthful arrogance, believed the battle was won. He paraded through the mansion, ensuring Maya saw him lounging by the pool, barking orders at other staff, and treating the house as his private fiefdom. His cruelty, now validated by his own perceived power, intensified. He deliberately spilled a red berry smoothie on the white Persian rug in the main hall, a piece he knew Maya would spend hours cleaning. "Oops," he said with a smarmy grin to his friend, Miles Evans Durand, who giggled disdainfully. "I think we'll need our cleaning specialist to handle this one." Maya arrived minutes later, summoned by the head of staff, Louis Erdem, a man of stiff posture and tired eyes, who had seen 3 generations of Andersons. He looked at the stain, then at Maya with an expression of contained sympathy. Maya said nothing. She knelt and began the meticulous cleaning process, each movement precise, each product applied in the exact order to not damage the old fibers. Inside, her nervous system was on fire. The disruption of routine, the strong smell of the smoothie, the injustice of the situation, it was all an assault. But on the outside, she was a statue of composure. She knew any emotional reaction would be used against her. Mathis's underestimation was her greatest weapon. He saw her as an aberration, a malfunctioning cleaning machine, incapable of complex feelings or strategy. That was her advantage. As she cleaned, she overheard their conversation. Mathis was boasting about how his father, Anders, would finally give him control of the company's new European division. "He just needs to see I can make tough decisions," he said, clearly referring to the dismissal of Santiago and Masha. "Get rid of dead weight. That's how business works." Maya's and her father's lives, their livelihoods, were just dead weight to him, a rung on his corporate ladder. The injustice of the situation deeply affected Maya's small, ordered life. That night, in her modest room in the staff quarters, she found her father packing his few belongings into an old cardboard box. "There's no point in fighting, my daughter," he said, his voice choked. "We are small. They are giants. Let's just leave with what dignity we have left." The sight broke Maya's heart. Her father, a man who had worked his entire life with his hands in the earth, who found joy in watching a seed sprout, was now reduced to a defeated man, ready to give up. It was this image that solidified her determination. Her resilience hadn't been born in that mansion. It had been forged in the fires of prejudice her entire life. She remembered school, the children who called her robot because she didn't get their jokes or sarcasm. She remembered teachers who deemed her slow because she needed more time to process questions. She remembered every job interview where the interviewer became uncomfortable with her lack of eye contact and dismissed her as not having the right team profile. Each of those painful experiences had deposited a layer of steel in her spine. She learned to observe, to analyze, to understand the systems people use to communicate and wield power, and she learned to use those systems to her advantage. Her motivation was simple and pure: unconditional love for her father, the only human being who had never made her feel wrong or broken. He saw her, he understood her, and she would move heaven and earth to protect him. She approached him, took the box from his hands, and set it aside. "We're not going anywhere, Papa," she said softly. "Please trust me." There was something in the quietude of her voice that made Santiago pause. He looked at his daughter and saw, perhaps for the first time, not the vulnerable girl he had always felt he needed to protect, but a woman with a strength he couldn't measure. He nodded slowly. Meanwhile, Anders Anderson was not idle. The scene in the garden had disturbed him more than he cared to admit. He spent the afternoon reviewing the personnel files of Maya Ortega Lim and Santiago Nikolic. Impeccable histories. No lateness, no complaints. Years of loyal, discreet service. Then he asked Louis Erdem, his confidant and longtime head of personnel, for a discreet report on Mathis's behavior in the mansion. Louis's report was professional and restrained, but the subtext screamed the truth. "The young Mr. Ferrari has an assertive management style," Louis wrote, which is at times interpreted as abrasive by the staff. Anders knew what that meant. It was a euphemism for tyranny. The last straw for Mathis came the following morning, on the 24-hour deadline. He found Maya and Santiago at the staff breakfast, eating in silence as if nothing had happened. The audacity enraged him. He marched over to their table. "Was I unclear? Your time is up. Pack your things and leave." Maya finished chewing a piece of bread, wiped her mouth with a napkin, and looked at him. "We received a communication from Mr. Erdem this morning. He informed us that, until further notice, we are to maintain our duties." Mathis's jaw tightened. Louis Erdem had defied him. Furious, he turned to find the butler, but he wasn't there. What he did next was the mistake that would seal his fate. Believing Maya was the source of his humiliation, he decided to destroy her in a way that even his father couldn't ignore. He went to his father's office safe, a place he had access to, took one of Anders's platinum watches, a limited edition piece worth $200,000, and waited for his opportunity. Later that day, as Maya was cleaning the library, he snuck in and slid the watch into the side pocket of her cleaning cart, hidden under some cloths. He slipped out unseen, or so he thought. The plan was simple: discover the theft later, suggest a search of staff belongings, and expose Maya as a common thief. It was the perfect checkmate. Every new humiliation only strengthened something within Maya that her oppressors couldn't see. A silent force being fueled by the very injustice they tried to impose. What those privileged people didn't know was that every act of contempt was writing its own sentence of defeat. For a moment, when Maya saw Mathis's silhouette leaving the library, she lowered her head, and anyone could think her spirit was broken. But those who know true strength know it grows precisely in the silence that precedes the storm. The accusation came like thunder from a clear sky, exactly as Mathis had planned. Late that afternoon, he staged a performative panic, running through the mansion's main corridor, claiming his favorite watch, a gift from his father, had disappeared from his suite. He made sure his distress was public, drawing the attention of several staff members, including the housekeeper, Nina Janssen, and one of the security guards, Kamau Caruso. "It was after the cleaning crew passed through my room," he said, his voice laced with false concern. "I don't want to accuse anyone, but an item of such value, we need to check." The suggestion hung in the air, venomous and directed. Louis Erdem, the butler, was called, and with calculated reluctance, Mathis insisted that to be fair to everyone, the cleaning carts and staff lockers should be inspected. It was cruel theater, and Maya was the unwilling protagonist. When they reached her cart, Mathis played the part of the reluctant detective. "Let's just have a quick look here so we can rule out any possibility," he said, already reaching into the side pocket. His fingers closed around the cold metal of the watch. He pulled it out, holding it in the air for everyone to see. Light glinted off the platinum and diamonds. A shocked silence fell over the small group. "Maya?" Mathis said, his voice a perfect blend of surprise and disappointment. "I can't believe it. After all my father has done for you and your old man?" Maya looked at the watch, then at Mathis's triumphant face. She didn't cry. She didn't protest. She just stood there, her expression calm and inscrutable, which infuriated Mathis even more. He expected an outburst, denials, a scene. Her quietude was a blank canvas on which he couldn't project his victory. It was at this moment that Maya's true ally revealed herself. Louis Erdem, who had been observing everything with his shrewd eyes, stepped forward. "Mr. Ferrari, perhaps we should discuss this privately in your father's office." Mathis grinned. "Excellent idea, Louis. I think my father needs to know what kind of people he has employed." He envisioned the scene. His father, forced to admit Mathis was right all along, handing him the keys to the kingdom. But when they entered the imposing mahogany office, they found Anders Anderson seated behind his desk, not with an expression of rage, but of cold, calculated serenity. Beside him, in a chair, sat a man Mathis didn't immediately recognize. It was Ramin Abashidze, the head of corporate security for Anderson Global, a man known for his discretion and ruthless efficiency. "Father," Mathis began, placing the watch on the desk. "Unfortunately, I was right about Maya. She's a thief." Anders didn't look at the watch. His eyes were fixed on his son. "Mathis, sit down." Anders's tone was dangerously calm. Mathis hesitated, but obeyed. "Where is the girl?" he asked. "She's waiting outside," Louis said, closing the door softly. "Anders," said Ramin, the head of security, his voice grave. "We have everything we need." It was then that Maya began to understand the true dimension of what was happening. She was not alone. Her secret preparation, which she thought was a solitary act of self-defense, had converged with a much larger plan. In the past few days after the incident in the garden, she had become even more vigilant. Her mind, which saw the world in patterns, had noticed the inconsistencies. Mathis's gaze, the way Louis Erdem seemed to observe her with new interest. And most importantly, she had begun to document everything. In a small notebook, she recorded every interaction, every sarcastic remark from Mathis, every unfair task. But her greatest precaution was something she had started doing out of a survival instinct. She began using a small digital audio recorder, a device the size of a paperclip discreetly attached to her uniform. She recorded the moment Mathis accused her of poor cleaning on the rug, his conversation with his friend, every word of disdain. She didn't know exactly how she would use it, but her data-gathering trained brain told her that information was power. What she didn't know was that Anders, impressed by her initial courage, had set his own plan in motion. He had instructed Ramin Abashidze to install discrete microcameras in common areas of the mansion, not to spy on his staff, but to monitor his own son. Anders loved Mathis, but he wasn't blind to his flaws. He wanted to give his son one last chance to prove his worth, to show some decency. Instead, Mathis used the rope he was given to hang himself. In the office, Anders gestured to Ramin. The head of security switched on a large monitor on the wall behind the desk. The first image that appeared was of the library. Silently, they watched a high-definition recording of Mathis Ferrari sneaking in, looking both ways, and sliding the platinum watch into Maya's cleaning cart. Mathis's face turned ashen. This is manipulated. It's a montage." Anders didn't reply. He simply gestured again. Ramin pressed a button, and the audio of the room was activated. It was Maya's voice, crystal clear, coming from the small recorder she had handed to Louis before entering the office. It was a recording of Mathis humiliating her, boasting to his friend, planning how he would get rid of her and her father. The arrogance in his voice was undeniable and damning. Maya's plan was to defend herself. Anders's plan was to test his son. Together, without even coordinating, they had set a perfect trap. Mathis looked from his father to the head of security, his brain struggling to process how quickly his world had crumbled. He hadn't just been underestimated by the autistic Maid, he had been completely outmaneuvered by his own father. For a moment, as Maya lowered her head being led into the billionaire's office, all the other staff thought they were witnessing her end. But anyone observing closely would notice that it wasn't fear in her eyes, but the cold, calculating glint of a strategy about to be executed. The trap was set, the evidence collected. What would happen next wouldn't just be a dismissal, it would be the complete demolition of a spoiled heir, live and in color. The silence in Anders Anderson's office was heavier than any shout. Matthijs Ferrari was paralyzed, his face a mask of disbelief and growing panic. The image of him, in high definition, planting the watch in Maya's cart, continued to loop on the monitor, a silent, irrefutable testament to his treachery. "Dad, I can explain," he stammered, arrogance evaporating and being replaced by childlike desperation. "She provoked me. She and that useless old man, they were conspiring against me, trying to undermine my authority." Anders raised a hand and the gesture was enough to silence Matthijs instantly. For the first time in his life, Matthijs saw on his father's face not disappointment or anger, but something far worse, a cold detachment, as if he were looking at a stranger, a rotten asset that needed to be liquidated. "You will explain nothing," Anders said, his voice low and cutting. "You will listen. For years, I overlooked your character flaws. I called it immaturity, overconfidence. I gave you the best schools, the best opportunities, a life that 99% of the world can only dream of. And what did you do with it? You used your privilege to torment an elderly man and to try and destroy the life of a young woman whose only offense was to have more integrity in her little finger than you have in your entire body." Anders rose, walking slowly around the desk until he stopped in front of his son. "You didn't just want to fire them, Matthijs. You wanted to humiliate them, break them. And why? Because a girl whom you considered beneath you dared to confront you with the truth. Your fragility is pathetic." He then turned to the door and said, "Luis, please ask Miss Ortega Lim to come in." Maya entered the office, her posture straight, her face calm. She looked at Matthijs, who was now shrinking in his chair, avoiding her gaze. Then she looked at Anders. "Miss Ortega Lim," Anders said, his tone shifting from ice to genuine respect. "I would like to apologize, on behalf of my family and this house. What you and your father have suffered here is unforgivable." Maya simply nodded, a small inclination of her head. Anders continued, his gaze returning to Matthijs. "The twist, Matthijs, is that you will not be fired. That would be too easy. Instead, you will experience a little of the world you so despise." He turned to Ramin Abashidze. "Cancel all of Matthijs's credit cards. Confiscate the keys to his cars and his penthouse apartment. Your trust fund will be frozen indefinitely. As of today, you are no longer a vice president of Anderson Global. You are nothing." Panic on Matthijs's face turned to terror. "Dad, no, you can't do this. I'm your son. I'm a Ferrari." "Your mother's name," Anders corrected coldly, "and you have dishonored it. You will have a subsistence allowance, enough to rent a room in a modest neighborhood and feed yourself. If you want more, you'll have to get a job, perhaps as a gardener, or in cleaning. We'll see what kind of authority you can command when you don't have my name and my money to hide behind." The execution of justice was surgical, complete, and devastating. It wasn't about revenge, it was about consequence. The weapon of crime was not just the planted watch, but the mountain of small cruelties, the documented arrogance, the recorded disdain. Every piece of evidence Matthijs thought he was building against Maya became a nail in his own coffin. He tried to destroy her reputation, and instead annihilated his own future. Maya watched the scene not with pleasure, but with a sense of restored balance. It was like solving a complex mathematical equation. All variables had been considered, and the solution was clean, logical, and final. The antagonist wasn't just defeated, he was dismantled by his own stupidity, his arrogance serving as the catalyst for his own downfall. Anders then did something that shocked everyone in the room. He approached Maya. "Your mind, Miss Lim, The way you observe, how you analyze, your attention to detail. It is a gift. One that my son never understood and that I admit had never truly noticed. I was wrong. He paused. I have a proposal for you, but that can wait. For now, please, take the rest of the week off, you and your father, with full pay. Louis will arrange everything you need to rest. Mathis finally broke and began to sob. They were the ugly tears of a deposed tyrant, filled with self-pity and impotent rage. He looked at Maya, his eyes red with fury. You weirdo. You ruined me. Maya stared at him one last time, and for the first time a micro-expression flickered across her face. It wasn't pity, nor triumph. It was a simple statement of fact. No, Mr. Ferrari, she said, her voice still a calm monotone. You ruined yourself. I merely took notes. In the center of that hall where arrogance once reigned, a new reality now took shape, a symphony finally finding its harmony after years of discordant notes. But as the masks fell, and justice was served so completely, one question remained. Could a future be built upon the ruins of such profound betrayal? And what form would that future take for the unlikely heroine of that mansion? Mathis Ferrari's fall was as spectacular as it was silent. There was no press scandal. Anders Anderson was powerful enough to quash any rumors. But within the mansion's walls and the corridors of Anderson Global, the story became a legend, whispered in admiring tones. Mathis, stripped of everything, vanished from the life of luxury. The reports that reached Anders were sporadic and melancholic. Mathis working as a waiter in a suburban diner, getting fired for his arrogance with customers. Mathis trying to sell insurance over the phone, failing miserably due to his utter lack of empathy. He was isolated, his wealthy friends abandoning him as soon as the money dried up. He learned the hard way that the loyalty he commanded wasn't for his character, but for his bank account. His punishment wasn't poverty, but irrelevance. He became exactly what he feared most, a nobody, a man haunted by the ghost of his former power, living a mediocre life, a permanent and just consequence of his own actions. Meanwhile, at the mansion, a silent transformation was underway. A week after the confrontation, Anders Anderson summoned Maya to his office again. Santiago accompanied her, looking 10 years younger, his worry and fear replaced by a radiant pride for his daughter. Miss Lim, Maya, Anders began. I've been observing your work for some time, even before all this. Your methodology, your organization, it's extraordinary. What my son saw as weirdness, I see as a talent for identifying patterns and anomalies. A talent that is extremely valuable. He slid a folder across the desk. I've created a new department at Anderson Global, Systems Integrity and Efficiency Analysis. It would be a small, elite team responsible for reviewing our internal protocols, identifying flaws, optimizing processes, and frankly, ensuring that people like Mathis can't exploit the system. I can't think of anyone more qualified to lead it than you. Maya was silent for a long moment, processing the information. Lead? A department? The idea was overwhelming. But then she thought of her father, the security it would bring. She thought of how her abilities, so often seen as a burden, could be used to create order and justice on a larger scale. I accept, she said, her voice firm, on one condition. My father. Anders smiled. It's already arranged. Santiago will be the chief consultant for the gardens of all our properties. He will work when and how he wishes, with a team to assist him. His knowledge is an asset I should have valued much sooner. Maya didn't just thrive, she flourished. In her new role, her autistic mind was her greatest strength. She saw flaws in spreadsheets that experienced accountants missed. She identified bottlenecks in production lines just by analyzing reports. She rewrote employee handbooks to be clearer, fairer, and more logical, protecting the vulnerable and eliminating ambiguities that predators could exploit. She didn't change who she was. The world around her changed to accommodate her brilliance. She became one of the most respected and, in a way, feared executives at Anderson Global. Her team was comprised of other out-of-the-box thinkers whom Anders, with his newfound perspective, began to recruit. People like data analyst Soren Kovacevic, Sullivan and strategist Yuna Benami, who had also been underestimated in their previous careers. They didn't communicate with hallway chatter, but with data, logic, and mutual respect. It was the most efficient and innovative work environment in the company. The other staff, like Louis Erdem and Nina Janssen, looked at Maya with deep respect. She never lost her quietness. But now, when she walked the halls, people didn't see the weird maid. They saw power, intelligence, and unwavering integrity. She proved that a person's worth isn't in their ability to conform, but in their courage to be authentic. The moral lesson of that saga echoed throughout the organization. True strength doesn't shout, it doesn't boast, it doesn't humiliate. It observes, analyzes, and acts with devastating precision when necessary. Maja's story became a powerful reminder that underestimating someone for being different is not just an act of prejudice, but a colossal strategic error. And you, what would you do if you were in Maya's shoes? Leave in the comments if you've ever had to use a skill others considered a weakness to overcome a challenge. If stories of justice like this inspire you, subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it so more people know that sometimes the most unlikely heroes are the ones who bring the greatest revolutions. Matthias Ferrari tried to destroy Maya, but ended up destroying himself. Maya learned that true revenge isn't about reciprocating the harm suffered. It's about achieving the success your enemies could never imagine.